Good evening, everybody. So, tonight, normally speaking, we would be having our ATK roleplay on Wednesday nights. That has been moved to Friday. I decided it'd be kind of fun just to change things up a little bit and do this a little bit more in a podcast style, as we've gotten a lot of questions over the course of last 2 months of setting up the ATK roleplay and having some of the just the soft sessions, the firm sessions, and getting people developing their characters about what is the lore of the world, what are the stories, what goes into the background of it. And I realized one of the challenges of stepping into a world like BattleTech for people who haven't been living and breathing it for a very long time is that it's very dense and it's a little intimidating, and a lot of it can be very dry if you're just sort of looking at it. So my goal here tonight is not to necessarily present anyone with an accurate, like a history, a sort of stale Civil War documentarian sort of thing. I don't want this to be something where we're breaking things down by, and there were this many men, this regiment doing. No. I want to talk about the stories. And in some ways, I'm here to tell you a story. I'm here to put fat in the pan. Because ultimately, when we talk about lore, the definition of lore is a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or held by a particular group, typically passed from person to person by word of mouth. And when I say we're doing lore tonight, that's what I'm going to be doing. And to begin with that, one of the questions we actually had was, one of the individuals in our roleplay said, hey, who are the Blackguard? Now, the Blackguard could refer to a lot of different things. It could refer to 2 different mercenary units. It could refer to a bunch of pirates. There's a bunch of references to it, but nothing that really leaps out. But what I think they meant was, who are the Blackwatch? And the Blackwatch are a very interesting unit in BattleTech lore and history. As just before our game time set, our game is set in the year 3063 in BattleTech history, and in 3057 the Blackwatch had suffered near total unit casualties and was down to 3 functional mechs left of their assault company. So how did we get there? Welcome to Lore with 404. Now, it's worth noting, when we talk about the Royal Blackwatch, they are a real unit, much as there are many references in BattleTech history and story and canon, much how you can go into BattleTech canon and say, like, hey, the Zippo Corporation still exists in BattleTech lore as a company that makes giant flamethrowers for battle mechs. It's kind of a joke how there are references to a Dr. Bonsai and the Bonsai Institute building mechs, a reference to a 1980s cult classic at the time when BattleTech was being written. Some things from the real world were incorporated into BattleTech, and one of them is the Royal Blackwatch Regiment, sometimes referred to as the Ghosts of the Blackwatch Regiment. And they actually are a real regiment that was formed in Scotland in 1725. They were a volunteer militia. Initially, and that dark tartan pattern, which is one of the most famous tartan patterns you can see everywhere. If you go to any place that sells flannel with tartans, you've seen a Blackwatch pattern. It is a dark blue and green pattern with some light lines in it. It's very famous. It's a handsome shirt. Everyone's owned one at least once. And that was where the black came from in the Blackwatch, was that dark tartan pattern. And the unit survived till present day. They were reorganized in 1739 from a militia and incorporated officially into the British military as the 43rd Regiment of Foot. In 1748, the 43rd was turned into the 42nd, and in 1881, the 42nd was combined into the 73rd Regiment of Foot to be called the Royal Highland Regiment, the Black Watch, which was eventually in 1931 renamed the Blackwatch Royal Highland Regiment. As of 2006, the Blackwatch 3rd Battalion Royal Regiment of Scotland exists and is called Free Scots. This unit is still extant in the BattleTech universe. And it is so through another group called the Northwind Highlanders. The Northwind Highlanders are a group of mercenaries, mostly of Scottish descent. The House of Stuart features prominently amongst them. And they have their own really interesting history. Part of the Star League from the 2300s on, they are a noteworthy mercenary company throughout the Star League's existence. And the Star League was the great unifying government that was the high point of humanity for hundreds of years in the Battletech universe. This is where humans hit their high watermark. This is where all the great feats of science fiction kind of happen, and everything kind of goes downhill after a while. But the Northwind Highlanders were already noteworthy by the 2400s. Now, we're talking about a game set in 3063, and the Northwind Highlanders still exist, and they are still just as famous as they ever have been. But part of their history is that they were a major contributor to the Star League, and one of the most elite parts of that contribution was the Royal Blackwatch Regiment, who were an elite unit taken from the best of the Northwind Highlanders, and their job was to actually explicitly defend the leader of the Star League. That was their job. They were the elite bodyguards picked out of an elite regiment of people who went and fought everyone everywhere. Now, if that sounds like a heck of a start, we then have to sort of switch gears a little bit, because, as I said, this was the pinnacle of things hundreds of years ago, and everything kind of goes a little bit wrong. The Star League, of course, collapses, and part of that process during the collapse is the so-called exodus of the clans. Not yet the clans at that point, but that was essentially the majority of the Star League's military exiting and going away feeling that this isn't going to work under Nicholas Kerensky. And when they leave, they eventually form the clans, and the clans are formed into 20 clans originally. Not all of them survive these several hundred ensuing years, but they really hold a lot of those original units accountable to the, I guess, lack of integrity, you might say, the corruptive influences. They are very resentful towards anything having to do with that original Star League, feeling it failed them and it failed its mission. And that was part of their exodus. Now, for putting the Northwind Highlanders on hold for a moment, to talk about the clans, there's a reason for that. We're going to come back to it, because all these things tie together over a story that takes centuries to tell. And if I am skipping over sections or glossing over points, well, you can put that into one of the Discords. I'll be happy to dig into that later, but there is so much written on these various subjects, I could spend days talking and never get to the depth of it. So I want to keep it to the sizzle. And the sizzle at this point is that we need to talk about the fact that the basic clan society was essentially highly militaristic. It was caste-based. Warriors were put at the top of it. They were functionally eugenicists who believed in genetic manipulation, and that you should be not born, as they called it, a free birth, but taken from the best elements of the warriors who came before you as genetic stock and brought out that way from a test tube. So there was a real detachment from humanity for the average clan warrior, who was the highest part of society. And each of the clans kind of developed their own personalities, but the one that we're focusing on right now is Clan Smoke Jaguar. And the Smoke Jaguars established very early on in their history that they took the attitude of the warriors are in charge and might makes right very, very seriously. And they were absolutely brutal. There's a very strong comparison to the Spartans. If you've ever studied antiquity, these sort of Spartans, the Spartans in general often compared to the clanners in the way they would organize themselves, the way they would conduct war, the way they would have a very minimal number of people engaging and under very strict rules of engagement. So that Spartan ethos is very much there, even down to the selective breeding and the culling and the brutality. And to sort of put that into context, in 2900, something happens in Smoke Jaguar space that doesn't happen very often in clan history, and that is the Revolt of Londorhome. Now, we talked about briefly that clans are caste-based, warriors are the most visible, and they are obviously the ones in charge, but there are also merchant classes, there are worker classes, there are other people who are integral to the management of a society, and that's where they are at. And Londorhome was a breadbasket world. It was a place that was basically producing food for a lot of Smoke Jaguar space, and there is a blight that affects their crops. The workers and merchants are basically begging the warriors, we need food, we are going to starve, and the warriors see this and go, how dare you ask us for anything, and proceed to start massacring them. Thousands of workers and merchants die. And in a very rare event in clan history, there's an actual rebellion against a higher caste. The response from the Smoke Jaguars is exactly what you would think it would be, and it is overwhelming force. And I'm glossing over a lot of facts here. There's a point where they actually go to another clan with a garrison on the world, Clan Firemandrel, and they were trying to convince them to have a challenge to take over the planet because they think maybe their lives will get better under this other clan, and it doesn't, and the reprisals are swift and brutal. And again, this ties very much back to the study of antiquity. If you studied the Spartans, you would know they had a subserviter people called the Helots. And the Helots vastly outnumbered the Spartans. They were not landowners. They were handling a lot of the affairs of the land, much like the workers and merchants were. And the Helots were essentially second-class citizens who would be drafted into fighting in Spartan wars. If you ever read about the famous battle at the Pass of Thermopylae with the 300 Spartans, frequently it's often dismissed that there were about 4,000 Helots there with the Spartans. One of the famous stories of history is the Spartans coming back from a war and the Spartan king asking all of the Helots, who here thinks they've done enough for Sparta and has fought hard enough? And they had all these Helots raise their hands, and the Spartan king said very well and had them all immediately put to death. That is the sort of leadership and societal role that Smoke Jaguar has appointed itself as their warriors. These are a people who only believe on being on the offense. And in 3050, when the clans invade the Inner Sphere, Clan Smoke Jaguar is very much at the forefront of that offense. Exiled, welcome in. The states of the former Rosselhag Republic very quickly are consumed by the so-called Crusader clans. There were two ideologies going on in the clans at the time. One of which led to the invasion in 3050, was the Crusader faction. They believed that they were going to go back into the Inner Sphere, reestablish the Star League, and make sure it works under the ideals of Nicholas Kerensky, just the way it should have been the first time, and really go back to the good old days. Despite the fact that those good old days never actually existed. Now, if that sounds a little bit familiar, well, some playbooks don't change. Palantir, welcome in. Waffle, welcome in. The Smoke Jaguars are quickly made noteworthy amongst the Inner Sphere forces for their brutality in combat, for their savagery, and for their absolute unwillingness to bend on even the slightest thing on worlds they conquered. People are generally not terribly mistreated after clanners invade. Some worlds do worse than others, and resistance is universally met with fierce reprisals. The Smoke Jaguars are especially brutal about this. They have no compulsions against killing non-combatants. They have no compulsions against making a statement. And this has not gone unnoticed. Now, their immediate neighbors are another clan called Clan Novacat, and it's worth noting none of the clans like one another. The clans get along due to a very rigid system of military interaction. Clan combat is based on a minimalization of waste. It's based on this bidding system where you actually try to undercut the forces you'll bring to defeat your opponent, so that way you look like you are a more superior person for achieving more with less. And either you're foolish and you get yourself killed by underbidding too radically, or you prove your genius. Now, if we've said the Smoke Jaguars are absolutely frothing aggression, Clan Novacat is one of the two clans that really stands out for being aggressive. Definitely firm proponents of the clanner lifestyle, definitely of the Crusader clans at that time. But they have one thing going for them that none of the other clans do, and that is they are the only clan that actually embraces an odd form of spirituality. Not religion, but spirituality. They take a lot of effort and pain to go out of their way to engage in intentional meditation, in guided meditation, in the use of psychoactive drugs, to have guided visions, if you will, to sort of direct them how they're going to do things. And they really believe in this. So on the one hand, you have a group that is absolutely, we are going to go forth and kill at all costs. They're absolutely aggressive. And their neighbors are this much more contemplative mystics. Still violent, still hyper aggressive compared to the inner sphere, but oddly mystical in a way. It's almost as if you had a bunch of berserkers living next door to a group of Jedi. And they do not get along at all. And when you get down to the bottom of the clan invasion in the 3050s, you'll notice right down at the bottom of the Rosselhog Republic, where formerly it was, moving into the battle space of the Draconis Combine, which has been coming under really, really extreme pressure. And the Draconis Combine has been getting carved up by the Smoke Jaguars. There's worlds that don't necessarily connect. The map is chunky. It's broken up because they're trying to get the same places. And they're not on good terms. And I need you to keep that in mind as we move forward, because in 3052, the Draconis Combine does something that hadn't really happened yet at that point. Now, obviously, we know that Comstar had the Battle of Tukiyid, and they were able to stop the overall clan advance for a number of years. There was no further Crusader action, but Coordinator Theodore Karita, who is at this point already a legend, he is well-renowned, he is an accomplished mech pilot, he is considered an extremely competent leader in the field at the battalion level for mechs and mixed infantry combat, leads an offensive onto a planet called Walcott. It is behind the lines in Smoke Jaguar space. And talking back about the Spartans had a lot of rules about combat, much like the clans did. But one of the rules the Spartans had, and if you've ever seen the movie 300, which had almost nothing to do with history, but they had this whole scene in the movie 300 with the sages being like, no, this is the wrong time of year, and you can't do this now. No good, no fighting now. Spartans actually had a lot of rules about that for practical reasons, and one of those real practical reasons was their method of combat didn't hold up over the long term, and they actually had rules about only engage an enemy for this long, and then you gotta stop, because your enemy will start adapting to you. And there's a few occasions noteworthy in history, and if you ever feel like going and reading Herodotus, you can read up on them, where they don't do that, and it goes very badly for the Spartans. Well, at this point, the Inner Sphere has sort of learned the foibles of clan combat. They've learned their rituals. They're starting to get a handle on it. And interestingly enough, inside of the Draconis Combine, while Theodore Karita is waging this military campaign against the Smoke Jaguars, there's another campaign happening which doesn't get as much comment. And we've talked about there being multiple castes in the clan system, And the warrior caste gets a lot of the paperwork and a lot of the lore and a lot of the time. But there's an interesting member of the Karita family, Chandraskar Karita, who's a real interesting character. There's not a lot written about him. There's only 1 or 2 fictions where he features as a side character, but he's a really neat one. And he's engaging with Clan Novacat, but not with their warriors, not with their leadership. He's engaging with their merchants. And he is slowly building up relationships in clan space in that way, because as it turns out, after the savagery committed by Clan Smoke Jaguar and Londorhome in the 2900s, they never recovered their merchant class. They never had that other layer of society that was doing the work of building the glue between different parts of space. Now, anyone who understands how society works knows that warriors, merchants, and laborers are 3 important legs of the stool. And you can have other groups in there: medics, doctors, professors, intellectuals. But those are the 3 things that, generally speaking, if you really had to go and say, people who can make stuff, people who can like move the stuff around, and people who can defend the stuff. They cut 2 legs off the stool. And they have proceeded for the last several hundred years doing a balancing act. And that balancing act starts to come down around their ears on Walcott. Now, the Caritans managed to invade Walcott. They conduct the trial according to clan rules. And in a stunning turn of events, they win. They are now in possession of a world and the space around it behind the lines. And at this point, Theodore Karita begins to really piss off most of Draconis Combine society. He's a hero of the entire place. He has just done the unimaginable. He is now widely regarded favorably, even in other great houses who don't like the Caritans very much. They don't like the Draconis Combine, but even they're going, that's impressive. The Draconis Combine is firmly rooted in the lore of the romanticism of feudal Japan. There's a real romance with it. And this is also the 1980s, sort of coming full circle here in the writing. And you'll see elements of Korean society. You'll see other elements of other Pan-Asian societies that were there. But Japanese feudal society features very front and center. And he moves on to the role of coordinator, which is functionally emperor, but it's the coordinator. And does a complete 180-degree turn in regards to how the Draconis Combine is going to deal with mercenaries. Up until now, the Draconis Combine has not been widely regarded by the mercenary community or the Mercenary Review Board. Generally, people don't like working for them. There's a very good odds that they are going to double cross you or not pay you. So there's been a lot of adversity there. Theodore Karita says, we are now going to embrace money soldiers. We are going to embrace mercenaries, and mercenaries are going to be very much respected because we are going to hire all the best ones we can, stage them on Walcott, and have them start branching out and attacking the back end of Smoke Jaguar space. Now remember, the Smoke Jaguars are all about offense. They're not big on defense. So and there's a lot of great sort of stories about this, and there's a number of really good fictions written in between 1994 and 1997. You can go read them. There's a number of novels. The one we're going to talk about a little bit here was written by Blaine Pardo, and it's called Impetus of War, and it involves the people we were talking about earlier, the Northwind Highlanders. Now, the Northwind Highlanders have already undergone their own fair share of strange drama. They had been working under the Capellans, who were an analog to communist China. Again, this was written in the 1980s, and the authors were not subtle in their Cold War politics. And the Northwind Highlanders had basically been ousted from their homeworld. They had been working with the Capellans. They kind of stoically were biting their tongues about it, but serving with their own distinction and not dishonoring their contracts. And enter Prince Hans Davian, who basically says, I will give you back your world of Northwind if you break ties with the Compelling Federation and come back over to us. And it causes almost a miniature civil war within the mercenary unit, and they eventually sort it out. Like, basically the Scots had to have a brawl, as Scots are wont to do. And if you want to understand a few things about them, just to put this in perspective, how Scottish did they write them? There was a mercenary unit that defected from the Capellans about a century earlier, and the Northwind Highlanders spent 40 years tracking them all down to kill them. The Scots hold grudges like you wouldn't believe. But they take this deal to have their ancestral homeworld back. This is the return of the House of Stuart to Northwind. It is a big deal for them. They do it. They take that back. There's an entire other thing called the Highlander Gambit. You can read that. But basically, there was the grandchild of one of the Northwind Highlanders still living in Capellan space who was sent to sort of infiltrate and destroy the unit from within. But it kind of works out in the end, and we're going to sort of rock and go past that. And his name is Lauren Jaffray. And Lauren Jaffray becomes a major within the Northwind Highlanders. And they are one of these premier mercenary units that is hired by the Draconis Combine to assail out from Walcott deep into Smoke Jaguar space. So, they take the job. And the Northwind Highlanders land on a world being defended not by a garrison, but by the entire Tau galaxy of the Smoke Jaguars. Now, to understand the sort of military designation of what that means, normally when you talk about mech groups, you're talking about lances, or in clan case, a star. A lance is 4 battle mechs, a star is 5 battle mechs. So it is the largest military formation in the clan's field. It's the equivalent of a brigade. So you're talking about, good grief, I mean, in terms of total mechs, that's 3 or more regiments. And a regiment, I'm trying to remember how the size of it, essentially you're talking dozens upon dozens of, it's a ridiculous number of battle mechs and tanks and aerospace fighters and elementals on top of it. This is essentially a fully functional, multifaceted army. And the one thing the Smoke Jaguars don't do well is boredom. And when they got stuck with this treaty, it took it that they couldn't go on the offensive anymore. You know, I'm sort of glossing over a point here, but I'm going to step back a second, because before we get to the Northwind Highlanders attacking, the Smoke Jaguars were really pissed off about losing Walcott. So pissed off, they go to the Ilkhan, who is sort of the overall leader of all the clans. He's elected, and say, we want to go after the Draconis Combine. And the Ilkhan, being politically savvy, looks at who's on the border of the Draconis space and says, sure, Clan Nova categories to go with them, as does Clan Ghostbear. Now, as we've said, clans don't get along. The Nova Cats and the Smoke Jaguars especially don't get along. And this leads up to the Battle of Luthien, which is the capital of the Draconis Combine. It is being defended by the Draconis Combine Mustard Soldiery, DCMS, none other than Wolf's Dragoons, and a few other mercenary units. And there's actually an entire battle scenario which breaks that down by the hour. And it gets pretty intense. Needless to say, at the end of it, the Inner Sphere holds the day. The Nova Cat forces that went there limp away at less than 40% of their initial investment in troops, battle mechs, tanks, aerospace fighters, and naval assets. There were ships in orbit that were part of this. So the Smoke Jaguars come away even worse. So they've had their nose punched twice by the Draconis Combine. And now they know the Inner Sphere is coming. And how to put this, there are a group of people who believe they were superior in every way, and now that's been shoved in their face twice, and they've got nothing to do but stare up at the sky, waiting, hoping someone comes to pick a fight with them. They want this fight. They want the fight to come to them. The Northwind Highlanders go to Wayland 5, and they meet that Tau Galaxy, and quickly realize they are in a world of hurt they had never prepared for. These Smoke Jaguars are absolutely brutal. They go out of their way to target infantry formations. It was very common for them to send light mechs rigged up with nothing but machine guns to do strafing runs down the back end of trenches that the Highlanders were trying to build. Like, imagine, if you will, World War I style trench warfare. That's all the Highlanders could do, was dig in and hold out till reinforcements could come. But it was going to be 3 months. 3 months is a very long time to be waiting for people to come on a planet where you are surrounded by people who want nothing more than to prove they can kill you. And the Jaguars were having a pretty good time putting the gears to them. Major Lauren Jeffrey, who we mentioned earlier, comes up with a very daring plan. Realizing that they are very close, literally one jump, one world away from Clan Nova Cat Space, and specifically Clan Nova Cat Space, which has the interesting feature of an orbital platform. Now, space stations aren't very common in Battletech. They're pretty rare. They're a lost technology. You can't build any more of them. So when you have one, it's a big deal. He gets this very daring idea to take these captured Smoke Jaguar mechs, repaint them to make them look like they're good, jump into Clan Nova Cat Space, and start insulting the crap out of them and issuing bullshit trials, basically picking a fight as if he were Clan Smoke Jaguar with a few other mech pilots. Knowing this is taking away forces and mech warriors from an already beleaguered defense, but hoping the enemy of my enemy might fuck up my enemy. Now, what's interesting to note is that the Star Colonel who was in charge of the defense of that place was engaged in many of these same rituals and the deep meditations and the use of recreational pharmaceuticals and hallucinogens, and had at that point been having one of these, they viewed them as prophetic visions. And he had this vision of a cat coming out of the smoke of a dying Smoke Jaguar, and if he fought it, he knew he'd die. And he didn't understand it. So this plot by Major Jaffray goes on, and needless to say, the Star Colonel is sufficiently antagonized. He organizes, knowing that the Smoke Jaguars have their entire Tau galaxy there, he organizes his own galaxy. Stations can be far more complicated, I would think. Stations are incredibly complicated, but in this case, they were specifically bidding for the right to basically steal jump ship recharge batteries, and they won it. The Nova Cats couldn't do shit about it. They weren't happy about it. They said, we're going to follow you home and you picked a fight with us, so it's tit for tat. And our Inner Sphere Northwind Highlanders were expecting that. The Nova Cats come to Wayland 5, and they're a little surprised at seeing these Inner Sphere trash here, but they really weren't there for them. They're there for the Smoke Jaguars, and the Inner Sphere proceeds to watch as two clan galaxies ignore them. Literally go one moment and don't care that they're on the battlefield to start laying into one another. It is what is called a grand melee amongst the clans. No one-on-one combat, winner takes all. Now, at this point, the Star Colonel of the Nova Cats believes he is going to honorably defeat Devon Osis, the galaxy commander of the Tau Galaxy, when a Clan Nova in Smoke Jaguar colors puts a heavy laser to the back of Devon Osis's mech's head and blows it clean off. And the Nova Cats are stunned. At which point, Major Jaffray of the Northwind Highlanders announces himself. and the Northwind Highlanders go on the offensive. Coincidentally, just as they are going on the offensive and they are holding their own, and at that point the Nova Cats are starting to get together and it looks like they may get the upper hand, Union class dropships start coming down. And the 72nd Northwind Fusiliers begin gently wafting onto the planet. And I'm trying to remember her name. Give me a second. I'm going to find it. Yeah, Colonel Andrea Sterling, in full Scottish burr, announces to all of Clan Nova Cat's surviving warriors, "Pardon your mechs or I'll pound you to snail snot." And it's one of the great quotes of Battletech lore. And the Star Colonel goes, "Well, you seem to have the better of us and you have us outnumbered, but we're still willing to fight you. And what do I call you?" And she says, "Well, I'm Colonel Andrea Sterling, but my friends call me Cat." And the Star Colonel remembers his vision of a cat coming out of the death of a Nova Cat, and he would die if he fought it, and the Nova Cats leave the field. And this is not the first time Nova Cats have visions and they just leave. So, Clan Smoke Jaguar knows who the Northwind Highlanders are at this point. And they don't like them. During this entire thing, over the course of centuries, there has been within the Northwind Highlanders functionally a cult, sort of a secret society, but the remnants of the Royal Blackwatch, the SLDF unit that was an elite unit that was charged with safeguarding the leader of the Star League, has been upkeeping its traditions. They are a very small unit. There are not many of them. They are barely known even inside the Northwind Highlanders themselves. With this great defeat of the Smoke Jaguars and the continuing offense, Operation Bulldog is conceived. Operation Bulldog is the reformation of the Star League and the goal of, we are going to remove Clan Smoke Jaguar from every single world they've taken in the Inner Sphere. Subsequently, we are going to have Operation Serpent, and that is to eliminate Clan Smoke Jaguar from existence. We're going to destroy them. Now, the SLDF unit that had been the Royal Blackwatch, upon the reformation of the Star League and this new thing, there's an immediate call that we need to step back into the light. We need to be part of this. We need to immediately reassert ourselves into our traditional position. And there's a young captain who says, wait a minute, we need to prove ourselves first. Otherwise, we're standing on the shoulders of others. We need to prove ourselves. And at the Battle of Huntress on the Clan Smoke Jaguar homeworld, the Royal Blackwatch reveals itself to the commander of their forces, who they are, and their mechs are all painted. They have a full company of them. They are in their original SLDF colors. They are proudly taking the field as the Royal Blackwatch and SLDF unit again. Now, I want you to consider this. The Smoke Jaguars are over 300 years steeped in the tradition that the Inner Sphere failed Star League, that any units that didn't leave with them betrayed the ideals of the Star League, and that they were the true inheritors of the Star League. They were what was good. They were what was true. They were what was genuine. And a unit appears from these genetically impure, inferior people stepping out of an already hated enemy of the Northwind Highlanders, who had besmirched them with dishonorable tactics, wearing SLDF colors and claiming to be a direct line to a Star League unit. Now, I said I wanted to paint some pictures, and I want to paint a picture now just so you can have an idea of the level of animosity that's about to happen between these two units. And I want you to envision a full army of United States Marines. Not just... And the United States Marines already have their own mystique to them, don't they? They have their own sort of very die-hard, gung-ho sort of attitude. And this isn't going to be any unit of United States Marines. This is going to be all of the greats. These will be the men who were at Tripoli, men who were at Tara, You know, Basilione is going to be there with his machine gun in hand. And General Mattis will be leading from the back. It'll be, you know, it'll be the full commitment of all the really hardest of the hardcore group. And they are all bored, and they're waiting for, you know, an enemy that they already don't like, General Cornwallis of the British, to come over and pick a fight with them. They're waiting for that pansy to come over here and pick a fight with them. And Cornwallis steps off the boat with all of his redcoats, but there's a group of redcoats who are all wearing Marine uniforms. And they're all saying they're the real Marines. How much hatred do you think could be felt across that room? That's the level of animosity that immediately happens on Huntress between the Smoke Jaguars and the Royal Blackwatch. And it is not even a military fight anymore. It is a brawl. To the point where Smoke Jaguar Command cannot control their mech warriors. When they see Royal Blackwatch units, they will ignore any orders to immediately try to kill them. Not fight them, not duel them. They want to send a message. This is gang warfare. A lot of commentary is made after the fact that the presence of the Royal Blackwatch, while effective as a unit, is a major contributing factor to part of why Smoke Jaguar is so ineffective on their homeworld at times, because they literally couldn't control themselves. They had to prove that these false SLDF units needed to die. And the feeling was mutual. With the Royal Blackwatch suddenly being resurrected, they have a full company strength of mechs. They have a renewed Star League. They can reclaim the honor of the unit. There is no quarter given on either side. And in the end, almost no Smoke Jaguar warriors survive on Huntress. Some do, some are taken as bondsmen. Almost all of them would rather die in the cockpit. Clan Smoke Jaguar will functionally cease to exist for the next 120 years. A very small remnant will continue to exist and will eventually be allowed to call themselves Smoke Jaguar, but as a non-voting clan. They won't have any political power or military power at that point. And as I sort of began this story, the Northwind Highlanders take the deeply bloodied Royal Blackwatch back in, and the Royal Blackwatch presents themselves to the new leader of the Star League, and they have suffered 70% casualties of their members. They have only 3 battle mechs left, and it was presumed this was a Pyrrhic victory for them. This was the beginning of the end. And history having its own interesting twist in the Battletech universe, the new Star League really wanted to have those ties of legitimacy back to the old Star League. They are hailed as heroes. They are brought back in, and very swiftly they are brought back up to battalion strength. Colonel Andrea Cat Sterling, who we talked about earlier, actually winds up becoming one of the 17 initial paladins of the reborn Star League. And they were exceptional pilots. And this all happens by 3057. So in 3063, Clan Smoke Jaguar is functionally extinct. The Royal Blackwatch is now once again a premier elite unit within the Inner Sphere. And a new Star League is rising in power. So that is the lore covering one small unit in one mercenary unit over the course of about 7 centuries, and how some decisions regarding how you treat people on one world in 2900 absolutely impacted you by having no knowledge of the outside world for Clan Smoke Jaguar, and the absolute animosity that you can have between 2 units that claim the same heritage but are on opposite sides. So this has been Lore with 404. How long have we been at this? I don't even realize how long I've been talking for. I'm not used to OBS yet. It's a new streaming platform for me, so I haven't been keeping an eye on the clock here. I don't know how long we've been live for. Does it say anywhere? About an hour. About an hour. So I feel like doing this in hour-long sound bites is about good, and typically Wednesday nights are going to be dedicated to the ATK roleplay. Obviously, ATK roleplay has moved to Friday this week, and I will not be able to do another lore dump this week, but I think I'd like to do one lore dump on a different subject every week. So I'm wondering, I might do something on the Star League. I might do something on pirates. No, there is no shortage of interesting topics and personalities to really dive into. If you'd like, I can certainly go and post links to some of the reading and source material on this. It's not all just reading Sarna. Some of it's actually reading books. I do that. So we're skipping this Friday and going the next Wednesday. Okay. Got it. So next Wednesday. Got it. I missed that. I would be happy to do this, I think. I think I wouldn't mind doing this once a week, of doing kind of an hour-long dive onto a subject matter of something interesting like that. Am I going to archive my VODs? I don't know if I set this one to archive or not. I might have. I can go and check. I think I did. Worst case, I'll put it up on YouTube, and we'll throw that up there, and we'll do that. So I think maybe we'll do this, call it maybe a Thursday night kind of thing, where I'll do a bit of a lore dump on a Thursday. And we'll see what we can do. But I think next time, I think our subject matter for lore discussions and sort of putting some fat in the pan, I think we're going to find some pirates to talk about. Because pirates are a subject that have a rich history in Battletech, and frequently only get like a turn of the page, and then they killed the pirates. Well, pirates are a little more interesting than you'd think.